On the buzz meter this Sunday, with casualties mounting in the Middle East, the media become a major battlefield. Are they playing into the hands of Hamas by blaming Israel for civilian deaths, or tilting too far in favor of Israel?
The Palestinians are experts at the PR fight. They specifically put little kids in front of weapons, so when Israel strikes back, they can put those images on the cover of a newspaper and say, look at how bad Israel is.
I think the image that most Americans are seeing from this conflict, by and large, are images of the destruction in Gaza. There's all these people talking about how the Israelis are losing the media war for the first time.
And are social media changing the landscape by spreading gruesome images of war that news organizations won't run? President Obama skips Jimmy Kimmel while dealing with the crisis over Russia and the downing of the Malaysian plane, but is still getting blamed for fundraising and golfing and dining out. Are the pundits being fair? The liberal Democrat who keeps getting much better press than Hillary Clinton. What explains the media's fixation with Elizabeth Warren? Plus, Jon Stewart fires back over my interview with John McCain by throwing down a challenge.
My 16 years on this show up against your 132 years of Senate service. What's that? Oh, really? I'm wrong? Okay. Point McCain. So, what do you say, Senator? Care to put your money where your forced smile through jaw-clenching anger is?
But why did the late-night comic duck my question about whether he's fair to Republicans? What do you say, John? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. There is no question that Hamas started the latest round of Mideast violence, first with the killing of 3 Israeli teenagers and then by firing rockets indiscriminately at the Jewish state. And there is no question that Israeli military superiority has led to far more deaths in Gaza, more than 1,000 at latest count, compared with 43 on the Israeli side, and despite Israel's efforts to avoid killing civilians. And that has made the media's framing of this story all the more crucial, as we see in this description of an Israeli airstrike.
Well, it certainly doesn't seem very pinpoint from where I am in Gaza right now. Just a short while ago, for an example, a building, an apartment building, a large building, was attacked by Israeli fire here in Gaza. Several people were killed, including children whose bodies were thrown from the windows. I've seen video of this. We captured it ourselves.
Even Jon Stewart had to defend himself after expressing concern, wrapped in satire, of course, about the rising death toll in Gaza.
Just merely mentioning Israel or questioning in any way the effectiveness or humanity of Israel's policies is not the same thing as being pro-Hamas.
So you're against murdered children?
Free Gaza! Free
Palestine! Bibi Netanyahu, who appeared on 4 Sunday shows this morning, says Hamas is manipulating the media by putting civilians in harm's way, while a Hamas spokesman is accusing the Israelis of genocide.
And all civilian casualties are unintended by us, but actually intended by Hamas. They want to pile up as many civilian dead as they can because somebody said they use, I mean, it's gruesome, they use telegenically dead Palestinians for their cause. They want the more dead, the better.
They are acting in the same way, killing the Palestinians just because they are Palestinians, like what Hitler was doing in the last century.
Joining us now to scrutinize the coverage of this war, Lauren Ashburn, Fox News contributor who holds Social Buzz on the Fox website. K.T. McFarland, Fox's national security analyst and a former Defense Department official in the Reagan administration. And Fred Francis, former Pentagon correspondent for NBC, now with the firm 15seconds.com. As news organizations grapple with covering this bloody conflict, how much impact is social media having?
Social media is the new bloody battlefield of this conflict. Unlike the way it was in 2008 or 2012, it has now taken on this life of propaganda for the Palestinians as they show these disturbing and gruesome images without a filter. And journalists are doing it too, without having an editor to say, this is too much.
KT, I've noticed a turn in the last 48 hours especially. A lot of commentators now say Israel easily winning the conflict on the battlefield, but losing the media war. True?
Sure. Well, Hamas understands that it's never going to beat Israel militarily. So the only place it can fight and win is in the public relations scope. And so what are they doing? look at the split screen you see. You see an Israeli official having to defend the deaths of the Palestinian children, and then you see the Palestinian children. What you don't see is the media saying to a Hamas spokesman, why are you putting children and women into places where you know they'll get killed? That's the question nobody asks.
A few journalists have asked it, but there haven't been many Hamas spokesmen on the air.
That's why. They don't put Hamas spokesmen on the air. They put the picture of the tragically, sadly, tragically dead children. And the Israelis, they don't put the pictures of the Israeli casualties on the air.
Fred Francis, you've reported from Gaza in your long television career. Do you see this unfolding as a propaganda war as well as a military war?
Well, it's always been a propaganda war when I was there, and the last time in 2006, and it's a propaganda war today. The fact is it's asymmetrical warfare. The Israelis with cutting-edge, heavy weapons, the Palestinians, urban guerrilla, and it's also asymmetrical journalism. I mean, as we just said, you know, the Palestinians are showing these, media is showing pictures of dead Palestinian children, but they can't show pictures of the fear of the Israelis being hit by 2,000 rockets over the last 22 days.
So are you faulting the media for asymmetrical journalism, or are you saying that journalists are sort of in a box here and have little choice?
Well, no, they have a choice. I mean, first of all, they need to stop tweeting from the battlefield. Okay? I mean, we're talking about, Lauren talked about social media. You need to stop that from them. It's hard enough to cover a war. The fear of being in combat is hard enough. But to tweet live while you're covering, you're going to make mistakes. And tweeting live pictures like that without any filter whatsoever is a disservice to journalism, a disservice to the viewers and listeners.
Even when journalists aren't making mistakes, this story, this conflict, this enmity between these two peoples, which has gone on for thousands of years, it seems like they get attacked from both sides almost no matter what they say or report.
Well, sure, you can have balanced comments, and I think this has happened to all of us at this table, and people hear what they want to hear. And then they use your comments as a journalist to fight their own propaganda war and saying, well, this journalist said that the Israelis are terrible, but on the other side, they would have said the Palestinians are also terrible for engaging in this battle, yet you hear what you want to hear.
Let's come back to your point about Hamas and its strategy, and you say it has to have a media strategy, and Fred calls it asymmetrical warfare and asymmetrical journalism. Do you think, aside from whether Hamas people are going before the cameras, that journalists are falling down on the job when it comes to pointing out things like where the weapons are deployed from civilian areas, hospitals, schools, mosques?
When was the last time you saw a journalist interview a Hamas official and say, why have you put children in front of bullets? Why have you put children to protect your missiles? They don't ask that question. And to the extent that there are Hamas officials out there, they're not answering that question. And it's an isolation strategy.
But you can't show it. Frankly, when you're in Gaza and you're driving around and you want to go to a mosque where you know there are weapons in the courtyard of the mosque, your driver won't take you there. And if somehow you get there,
Does this happen to you?
It's happened to me. I mean, Palestinian gunmen will come out and say, oh, it's not safe for you to go there. They don't want you to see the rockets in the courtyard of the school, the courtyard of so it's not just asking the questions. You know, the Palestinians won't let you see it. Hamas won't let you see it.
And it's very clever because they realize that if they can isolate Israel, either isolate Israel from the international community, drive a wedge between Israel and the United States, cause, for example, the Episcopal Church of America considering should it divest in Israeli, investments. That all of that does is it really isolates Israel, so Israel then is alone.
But you keep focusing on whether or not we have the ability to ask the questions of the people on the Palestinian side who are prosecuting this war. But there are lots of countries where we don't have access to people to ask questions. Is there enough balance, in your view, in the reporting, in the newspaper stories, in the television reports, that point out that, for example, Israel, clearly Israel's made mistakes. There have been schools and other places that have been hit, and children have died, and it is heartrending. But that point out that Israel drops leaflets and makes telephone calls in an effort to at least minimize civilian casualties.
Okay, let me just say, I was watching a YouTube video of a destruction of an apartment building in Gaza. What it showed was that the commentary was, isn't this terrible? Israel's just destroyed an apartment building. What the video showed was that 2 minutes prior to the destruction, there was a flash bomb. In other words, there was a warning to get out of the building. What you didn't see were Palestinian children running out of the building. But there was no media comment.
I don't actually think that Israel is losing the PR war. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is been on television so much you'd think he was an anchor, a co-anchor on some of these shows, or certainly a contributor. But they have actually no choice to do what they're doing, and I'm not favoring one side or the other. I've been accused of someone of Lebanese descent of when I'm in Israel, reporting in Israel, that I favor the Palestinian side, and I've been accused on the Palestinian side because I won't take their side of it. So I'm not saying Israel is right or wrong here, but they're certainly not losing the PR.
I have to completely disagree with you, Fred, because I think that these pictures that you're seeing on social media of the fathers carrying the dead babies and people, as you said, just lying there, and they are losing this. They only have the face of Benjamin Netanyahu. When you can't compete with dead bodies.
On Fred's point about Netanyahu being all over the airwaves, there was a commentator on MSNBC named Rula Jibril who raised this point on one of the programs and then was invited back to talk to MSNBC anchor Chris Hayes about her view. Let me play this now for you and you comment on the other side.
We're ridiculous. We are disgustingly biased when it comes to this issue. Look at how many airtime Netanyahu and his folks have on air on a daily basis. Andrea Mitchell and others. I never seen one Palestinian being interviewed on these same issues. Well,
if you appear on a cable news network, you trash that network and one of its hosts by name on any issue, Gaza, infrastructure spending, sports coverage, or funny internet cat videos, the folks of the network will not take kindly to it. Not some grand conspiracy at work, fairly predictable case of cause and effect.
Right, nobody likes to be criticized, right? And especially media organizations who do all of the criticism. I understand what he's saying, and I also understand what Rula is saying, that there aren't as many, she's good, right, for criticizing, and there aren't as many Palestinians who are on the air. But Chris knows better. There are a lot of organizations that do try to show both sides and present the conflict.
I think you're being generous. I thought his comments were outrageous. Now, Chris Hayes is a smart guy, but basically he's saying, you want to come on MSNBC, you better not poke us in the eye, you better not challenge our coverage, or maybe you won't get invited back. And by the way, the network suddenly says, well, you know, she was a contributor until last month, she wasn't renewed.
But she also says that she chose not to renew. So, I mean, there's a little bit of discrepancy there. But you have to agree with me, Howie, that he's right. People don't want to hear at certain networks criticism.
He is right, and that doesn't make it right. And it really makes me angry because the media love to point fingers at everybody else. And when their own coverage or their own premises are challenged, suddenly it's like, well, what do you expect? We're not going to use this person anymore. What about, in the remaining minute that we have, what about Rula's point that the voices on the airwaves and maybe in print overwhelmingly Israeli, and therefore she sees, as a Palestinian American, she sees this as being pro-Israeli?
But what you're doing is comparing, okay, you have a talking head, an Israeli politician, and there's an empty chair when it's a Hamas talking head politician. You don't see an empty chair. You see the picture of the civilian destruction and the civilian casualties. So it's almost an unfair comparison when you see bodies versus talking heads.
My point is the Hamas and the Palestinians have overdone it so much that we understand, the American people understand, and people in Europe understand, and certainly in Israel they understand what Hamas is doing, and they're not being taken in by this anymore. You say they're losing the PR battle. Let me tell you something. 80% approval rating for Netanyahu, the best numbers he's ever had.
All right, there were some Palestinian voices, people like Hana Ashrawi, not from the Hamas wing of the party, but at least they were on this morning countering Netanyahu. Send me a tweet about our show during this hour on this subject, at Howard Kurtz. We're going to read some of your messages at the end of the program. When we come back, the tensions over the plane shot down in Ukraine has more pundits taking aim at President Obama. And later, how I somehow started a spat between Jon Stewart and John McCain.